I'm a vet 34, and until yesterday, I thought I had a perfect marriage. 8 years with James, my husband, or so I believed. Then came that call, while I was at my mother's birthday. "I'm divorcing you," he laughed, "and I already sold our house." His voice dripped with satisfaction, thinking he'd left me with nothing. What James didn't know was that I'd suspected something for months. I had quietly prepared. If you're watching this from a place where you felt betrayed, hit subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turn this nightmare around. I met James at a charity gala in downtown Chicago 10 years ago. I was 24, ambitious, and working my way up at a marketing firm. He was 26, charismatic, and already making waves in real estate development. The night we met, I was helping organize the event for a client, rushing around, making sure everything was perfect, when I literally bumped into him, spilling champagne on his clearly expensive suit. "That's one way to get my attention," he said with a smile that made me forget my embarrassment instantly. Instead of being upset, he asked for my number. 3 days later, we had our first date at an exclusive restaurant I could never have afforded on my own. James was everything I thought I wanted: intelligent, ambitious, charming, and he seemed to adore me. Our romance moved at lightning speed. Within 8 months, he proposed during a surprise trip to the Amalfi Coast. I said yes, without hesitation, ignoring my sister Amanda's gentle suggestion that maybe we should date longer before making such a commitment. "When you know," I told her confidently. The wedding was lavish, exactly what James wanted. Looking back, I should have noticed how little input I had in the planning. He insisted on handling everything from the venue to the guest list, claiming he wanted to spare me the stress. I was so flattered by his attention to detail that I didn't recognize it for what it was: his need for control. We bought our dream house in North Shore, an upscale Chicago suburb. A beautiful colonial with 5 bedrooms, a chef's kitchen, and a backyard that I imagined would someday be filled with children's laughter. James insisted on putting the house solely in his name, since his credit was better and it would give us the best mortgage rate. I agreed, another decision I would come to regret. The first 5 years were good, at least on the surface. We traveled, built our careers, and entertained in our beautiful home. We became known among our friends as the perfect couple. James would toast me at dinner parties, calling me the best decision I ever made. Everyone thought we were living a fairy tale. We had decided to postpone having children to focus on our careers, though that had been more James's decision than mine. Whenever I brought up the topic, he had a new reason to wait. We needed more financial security. He wanted to be more established in his business. We should travel more before settling down. I went along with it, believing we had all the time in the world. My career at the marketing firm was thriving. I was offered a promotion that would have made me the youngest vice president in the company's history, but it required occasional travel to the New York office. James convinced me to turn it down. "You don't need that stress, he said. "Besides, I'd miss you too much when you're gone." It seemed romantic at the time. Now I see it was the first major sacrifice he manipulated me into making. I maintained a close relationship with my mother and sister, despite James's subtle attempts to limit our time together. My father had passed away when I was in college, and these 2 women were my rocks. James always had an excuse for why we couldn't attend family gatherings, or why they couldn't visit. He was too tired. We had other plans. Our house was being renovated. In contrast, James rarely spoke about his family. I met his parents at our wedding, but they seemed distant. His mother later confided in me that James had always been difficult, cutting people off when they disagreed with him. I dismissed this as typical family tension, another warning sign I chose to ignore. As I built our life together, I didn't notice how James was gradually taking control. He suggested combining our finances for simplicity, took over paying the bills, and made comments about my spending habits that made me second-guess every purchase. When I wanted to redecorate our living room, he questioned whether we could afford it, despite the expensive golf clubs he'd bought himself the previous week. These were the first red flags waving boldly before me, but I was colorblind to them. I believed in our marriage too much to see what was happening right in front of me. The first clear sign something was wrong came during our 6th year of marriage. James became increasingly secretive about our finances. When I asked about household expenses or our investments, his answers grew vague and dismissive. "Don't worry about it. I've got everything under control," became his standard response, usually followed by, "You never had a head for numbers anyway." His business trips, which had always been frequent, became more so. 3 days in Miami turned into a week. A weekend conference in Seattle extended to 10 days with little explanation. When he was home, he was constantly on his phone stepping outside to take calls, his voice too low for me to hear. I noticed he had started password protecting everything: his phone, laptop, even our home desktop that we used to share. One night, I asked him casually about the new passwords while we were getting ready for bed. "Just being security conscious," he said with a shrug. "There's been some identity theft cases at work." Then came the receipts. A dinner for two at an expensive restaurant downtown on a night he told me he was working late. A jewelry purchase that never appeared as a gift for me. Hotel charges in Chicago when he was supposedly in Denver. Credit card statements that he used to leave on his desk now disappeared into his locked briefcase. His criticism began subtly but grew more pronounced. My cooking, which he used to praise suddenly, wasn't up to par. My outfits, which he had once complimented, now looked frumpy or trying too hard. My ideas at dinner parties with friends were naive or uninformed. "Maybe you should read more," he suggested once, after disagreeing with me in front of our friends, causing an uncomfortable silence around the table. Our social circle began to shrink, but not evenly. We saw less of my friends and more of his. When I suggested inviting my college roommate and her husband for dinner, James had a reason why this weekend wasn't good or next month was too busy. When I mentioned visiting my mother more often, he reminded me of all the projects we needed to complete around the house. Then came the dinner party that opened my eyes. We were hosting several of James's business associates and their spouses. I had spent the entire day cooking James's favorite dishes, making sure everything was perfect. During dinner, I shared an anecdote about a marketing campaign my team had developed. "Sweetie," James interrupted, his tone condescending. "You're confusing everyone. That's not how advertising metrics work." He then proceeded to explain my own industry to me, getting several facts wrong in the process. When I tried to gently correct him, he laughed and said, This is why she sticks to the creative side. Numbers aren't her thing," causing awkward chuckles around the table. I felt humiliated and small. That night, after everyone had left, I confronted him. "You undermined me in front of everyone. Why would you do that?" "Don't be so sensitive," he said dismissively. "I was just having fun. Besides, you were rambling. I saved you from embarrassing yourself." I went to bed feeling a gnawing anxiety that had become increasingly familiar. The next morning, I looked at my husband while he slept and wondered who this man really was. The charming, supportive partner I thought I had married seemed to be disappearing before my eyes. The following week, I suggested marriage counselling. James's reaction was immediate and harsh. "Therapy. That's for weak people who can't solve their own problems. We're fine, Yvette. If you're unhappy, that's something you need to work on yourself." That weekend, I visited Amanda without telling James. Over coffee in her kitchen while her kids played in the backyard, I finally admitted that something felt wrong in my marriage. "I don't know if I'm overreacting," I said, fighting back tears. Amanda reached across the table and took my hand. "You're not overreacting. I've been concerned for years, but you seem so convinced he was perfect." "What should I do?" I asked. "First, you need to know exactly what you're dealing with," she said firmly. "I know a private investigator through work. Discreet, thorough. Let me give you his number." I left with the PI's contact information, burning a hole in my pocket, torn between loyalty to my marriage and an increasing fear for my future. I stared at the private investigator's business card for 3 days before finally making the call. His name was Robert, a former police detective with 20 years of experience. We met at a coffee shop far from my neighborhood, and I felt like I was in a spy movie, constantly checking over my shoulder. "I just need to know what I'm dealing with." I told him, feeling guilty despite my suspicions. "If I'm wrong, no one ever needs to know about this." Robert was professional and direct. "I'll need access to whatever financial information you can provide, dates of his supposed business trips, and any other details that seem relevant." Gathering that information without alerting James was challenging. I waited until he was showering to photograph statements from his briefcase. I wrote down dates and locations from his calendar when he left his planner open. I noted names that appeared repeatedly in his text notifications. 2 weeks later, Robert confirmed what my heart already knew. James was having an affair with Allison Davis, a real estate agent who had worked with him on several properties. Hotel receipts, restaurant charges, and photographs of them entering and leaving an apartment building in the city provided irrefutable evidence. "There's more," Robert said, sliding a folder across the table. "Based on the financial documents you provided, there appear to be irregularities in your joint accounts. Money being moved to accounts you don't seem to have access to." I opened the folder with trembling hands. Bank statements showed large transfers from our joint accounts to LLCs I'd never heard of. Property documents revealed James had been buying and selling real estate without my knowledge, despite many of these transactions involving marital assets. He's been meeting with a lawyer too, Robert added. Martin Geller. He specializes in high-asset divorces. My stomach dropped. James wasn't just cheating on me. He was planning to leave me, and it looked like he was hiding assets in preparation. That afternoon, I called a divorce attorney Amanda had recommended, Sarah Jensen. She reviewed Robert's findings and didn't mince words. Your husband is preparing for divorce and trying to shield assets. We need to act quickly but discreetly. Don't confront him yet. We need to gather more information while he still thinks you're in the dark. Sarah advised me to document everything, open a separate bank account, and transfer my inheritance from my father into it. That money was never commingled with marital assets, correct? She asked. No, I kept it separate like my father asked. I confirmed. Good. Keep it that way. Also gather all important documents, birth certificate, passport, financial records, and make copies. Store them somewhere safe outside your home. Over the next few weeks, I followed Sarah's advice while maintaining a facade of normalcy with James. I opened an account at a different bank and transferred my inheritance. I scanned important documents at work and stored them on an encrypted drive. I started tracking every unusual financial movement I could access. The more I looked, the more I discovered. James had been funneling company profits into hidden accounts for over a year. He had established shell companies to hide real estate transactions. Most disturbingly, I found draft emails between James and his lawyer discussing strategies to claim I had contributed nothing to our assets and deserved minimal support. She's never been involved in the business, James wrote. She has no idea what anything is worth. We'll offer her the furniture and a small settlement to go away quietly. The cold calculation in those words broke something in me. This wasn't just about an affair or growing apart. This was betrayal on a level I couldn't have imagined. Sarah connected me with a forensic accountant who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Melissa Park spent hours with me patiently explaining how we could trace the money James had hidden. Based on what we've found so far, he's been planning this for at least 18 months, Melissa said, showing me a timeline of suspicious transactions. But he's made mistakes. Overconfident people always do. Those mistakes would become our leverage. James had violated numerous laws regarding marital property. He had committed tax fraud by misrepresenting business income. He had even forged my signature on several documents, a criminal offense. Meanwhile, I continued to play the role of unsuspecting wife. I made his favorite meals, didn't question his late nights, and even endured weekend brunches with friends, where Allison, coincidentally, showed up. Every fake smile felt like swallowing glass. But I knew my preparation was more important than my pride. Sarah and her team worked quickly to establish a complete record of our marital assets before James could hide more. We documented the true value of his business, identified all properties purchased during our marriage, and created a detailed accounting of our investments and accounts. We're almost ready, Sarah told me during a secure call from my office. The next time he makes a significant move, we'll be prepared to respond. I didn't know then how soon that moment would come, or how devastating and ultimately empowering it would be. My mother's 65th birthday fell on a Saturday in late May. James had conveniently scheduled a business trip that weekend, so I drove to my childhood home alone for the celebration. Mum Amanda and I spent the morning decorating the backyard for the small family gathering that afternoon. You seem distracted, Mum said, as we arranged flowers on the patio table. Just tired. I lied, not wanting to ruin her special day with my marital problems. Amanda gave me a knowing look, but didn't push. She was the only family member who knew what was happening, having helped me connect with Sarah and providing emotional support during my worst moments of doubt and fear. Guests began arriving around 2 aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few of Mum's closest friends. Despite my inner turmoil, I found myself enjoying the simple pleasure of being surrounded by people who genuinely cared about each other. No pretense, no hidden agendas. We had just served cake when my phone rang. James's name flashed on the screen. I considered ignoring it, but worried it might make him suspicious if I didn't answer. "Excuse me," I said, stepping away from the table. "I need to take this." I walked to a quiet corner of the garden underneath an old oak tree that had witnessed countless family celebrations. "Hello," I answered, keeping my voice neutral. "Yvette?" James's tone was strangely jubilant. I could hear noise in the background, clinking glasses, muffled conversation. "I have some news for you." Something in his voice made my stomach clench. "What is it?" "I've decided to end our marriage," he announced as casually as if he were cancelling dinner plans. Despite weeks of preparation for this moment, the words still hit like a physical blow. I steadied myself against the tree trunk. "I see," I managed to say, my voice surprisingly steady. Then came the laugh, cold, triumphant, cruel. "But that's not all. I've already sold the house. Closed yesterday. You have until the end of the week to get your things." "You sold our house," I repeated loudly enough that Amanda, who had been watching me from a distance, started walking toward me. "Technically my house," James corrected. "Remember, only my name on the deed. Quite fortunate, wouldn't you say?" The pieces clicked into place. This was why he'd insisted on keeping the house in his name only. He'd been planning this for years, not months. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked, playing along. "Not my problem," he replied cheerfully. "Maybe your mother has a spare room. Oh wait, she lives in that tiny condo now." My mother had downsized after my father died, another fact James was using against me. "You can't do this," I said, injecting a note of panic into my voice while catching Amanda's eye and motioning for her to call Sarah. "Already done," James gloated. "The funds have been transferred to my personal account, which you don't have access to. By the time you figure out how to fight this, I'll be long gone with what's mine." That's when I allowed myself a small smile. "What makes you think I haven't figured it out already?" There was a pause, a moment of hesitation. "What's that supposed to mean?" "You're not as clever as you think, James," I said quietly. "I know about Allison. I know about the shell companies. I know everything." "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice had lost its swagger. "My lawyer will see you soon, very soon." I ended the call before he could respond. Amanda was already on the phone with Sarah, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. When she hung up, she gripped my shoulders. "Sarah says to come to her office right now. She's implementing the emergency protocol." I nodded, numb but resolute. "I need to tell Mom something." "Tell her the truth," Amanda said firmly. "You have nothing to be ashamed of." I returned to the party where concerned faces greeted me. In as few words as possible, I explained that James had filed for divorce and sold our house without my knowledge. Gasps of shock and outrage followed, then immediate offers of support. "Go do what you need to do," Mum said, hugging me tightly. "Your room is always waiting for you here." Amanda drove me directly to Sarah's office, where a team was already assembled despite it being Saturday afternoon. Sarah, looking battle-ready in jeans and a blazer, met us in the conference room. "The good news is we were prepared for something like this," she said without preamble. "The bad news is he's moved faster than we expected." "What's happening now?" I asked. "My associate just filed an emergency injunction with the court to freeze the proceeds from the house sale," Sarah explained. "Since it's clearly marital property, regardless of whose name is on the deed, selling it without your knowledge or consent constitutes fraud and dissipation of marital assets." Melissa, the forensic accountant, was working at a laptop in the corner. "I've identified the account where the funds were transferred," she announced. "We've already notified the bank of potential fraud and they've placed a 72-hour hold pending court review." My phone began buzzing incessantly, James calling repeatedly. Sarah nodded at it. "Put it on speaker, but don't tell him where you are or who you're with." I answered, activating the speaker. "What the hell did you do?" James shouted, his earlier smugness replaced by rage. "What are you talking about?" I asked innocently. "The money, the bank has frozen the account. They said there's a fraud investigation." "How interesting," I replied calmly. "It's almost as if selling someone's home without their knowledge is illegal." "It's my house," he snarled. "My name on the deed." "Marital property," I corrected him. "And I have an excellent lawyer who agrees." "You'll regret this," he threatened before hanging up. Sarah looked pleased. "That call was recorded and will serve us well in court. Now let's talk about your immediate needs." We spent the next 3 hours implementing our contingency plan. Sarah's team prepared court filings for Monday morning. A paralegal helped me draft a statement for my workplace, explaining that I was going through a divorce and might need flexibility in the coming weeks. Amanda arranged for a security service to accompany me to the house the next day to retrieve essential items and valuables. That night I stayed at Amanda's. After her husband put their children to bed, the three of us sat in their kitchen drinking wine and strategizing. On the surface, I maintained composure, focusing on practical steps and next moves. But when I finally closed the guest room door behind me alone, for the first time since the call, I collapsed onto the bed in silent sobs. The betrayal, the calculated cruelty, the years of manipulation, it all crashed over me in waves. I cried for the marriage I thought I had, for the future. I had planned for the love I now realized had been an illusion. I cried until there were no tears left, then lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind cycling through 8 years of memories, recategorizing them from love to strategy. When dawn broke, I rose with swollen eyes, but a strengthened resolve. James had underestimated me for years. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Monday morning arrived with a flurry of activity. Sarah had secured an emergency hearing at family court for 9 a.m. I dressed in a conservative navy suit, wanting to project competence and stability before the judge. Remember, Sarah coached as we walked up the courthouse steps. Let me do most of the talking. If the judge asks you questions directly, answer honestly but concisely. No emotional outbursts, no matter what James or his attorney says. The courtroom was intimidating with its dark wood panels and formal atmosphere. James was already seated with his attorney Martin Geller, a silver-haired man known for aggressive divorce tactics. James refused to meet my eyes, staring straight ahead with a clenched jaw. Judge Harriet Wilson, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, reviewed our emergency motion with practiced efficiency. Sarah presented the evidence of the house sale, including the deed, showing it was purchased during our marriage documentation of my financial contributions to mortgage payments, and proof that James had acted without my knowledge or consent. Your Honour, Geller countered, the deed is solely in my client's name. Mrs. Patterson has no legal claim to the property. Judge Wilson peered at him over her reading glasses. Counsellor, are you seriously arguing that a home purchased during marriage lived in by both parties for 8 years and maintained with marital funds is not marital property simply because of whose name appears on the deed? Geller stammered. The circumstances are unique, Your Honour. The circumstances appear to be a textbook attempt to defraud a spouse, Judge Wilson interrupted. Mr. Patterson, did you sell the marital home without informing your wife? James shifted uncomfortably. It's my house. I didn't need her permission. Go. The judge's expression hardened. That is not correct under Illinois law, sir. This court takes a very dim view of parties who attempt to dissipate marital assets prior to divorce proceedings. She issued a temporary restraining order, freezing all proceeds from the house sale, and ordered a comprehensive freeze on all marital assets pending further investigation. She also ordered James to provide a full accounting of all financial transactions for the past 24 months within 7 days. If I find evidence of further attempts to hide assets, she warned, looking directly at James, there will be severe consequences, potentially including contempt charges. As we exited the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of James's face, shock mingled with fury. He hadn't expected me to fight back. He certainly hadn't expected to lose the first round so decisively. Sarah steered me toward a private conference room. That went well, she said once the door closed behind us. Judge Wilson is known for her low tolerance for financial shenanigans in divorce cases. What happens next? I asked. Now we go on the offensive, she replied. The private investigator has uncovered more than just the affair with Allison. There appear to be at least 2 other women, plus evidence that James has been planning this divorce for over a year. She showed me photos of James with different women emails discussing divorce strategies dating back 14 months and records of consultations with 3 different divorce attorneys before settling on Geller. This wasn't a sudden decision, Sarah explained. This was a calculated campaign to leave you with as little as possible. As we were reviewing the evidence, there was a knock at the door. Sarah's assistant entered with news that Geller had requested a meeting to discuss settlement terms. That was fast, I remarked. Sarah smiled. He knows they're in a weak position after this morning. Let's hear what they're offering. Geller arrived alone, his earlier arrogance replaced with strained professionalism. My client is willing to be generous, despite the unnecessary drama this morning, he began. He'll offer $50,000 and allow Mrs. Patterson to keep her personal belongings. Sarah actually laughed. Your client fraudulently sold a $1.2 million home, has hidden assets in multiple shell companies, and committed documented tax fraud. We're filing for discovery of all business records, personal accounts, and communications. We'll be deposing Ms. Davis and the other women involved in this scheme, and you're offering $50,000. Geller's face reddened. My client is prepared for a fight if that's what you want. Actually, Sarah replied calmly, we've been preparing for this fight for months while your client thought he was being clever. Please inform Mr. Patterson that our counteroffer is full financial disclosure, a 50-50 split of all marital assets including his business, which was grown during the marriage, plus legal fees and temporary support during proceedings. After Geller left, looking distinctly uncomfortable, I returned to my office for the first time since Friday. My boss Michael had already received my email about the divorce situation and immediately called me into his office. "Take whatever time you need," he said supportively, "and that promotion you turned down last year, the position is open again if you're interested." The irony wasn't lost on me. The very promotion James had convinced me to decline was now available just when I needed to secure my financial independence. I accepted on the spot. As I settled back at my desk trying to focus on work as a welcome distraction, my assistant forwarded a message from an unfamiliar email address. The sender was Alison Davis. "We need to talk." It read, simply followed by a phone number. After consulting with Sarah, I arranged to meet Alison at a coffee shop halfway between our offices, with Sarah's investigator stationed nearby for safety. I arrived first, selecting a table with a clear view of the entrance and exits. Alison walked in 15 minutes late, looking nothing like the confident woman I'd seen in photos. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her normally perfect hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "What do you want to talk about?" I asked neutrally. "James isn't who you think he is," she began. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. "I think I figured that out." "No, I mean, he's worse," Alison insisted. "I'm not the first. There was a woman before you, Natalie Hamilton. He did the same thing to her. They weren't married, but they owned property together. He managed to get everything in his name, then left her with nothing." My breath caught. "How do you know this?" "Because he's doing it to me too," she admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "The apartment you probably saw us at, he convinced me to sell my condo and put the money into that place as an investment opportunity. But my name isn't on the deed. When I asked about it last week, he told me business is business, and I should have known better." I studied her face, looking for deception and finding only humiliation and regret. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was wrong," she said simply. "I believed him when he said you were cold, uninterested in his success, just using him for his money. I believed him because I wanted to. But then I saw him do the same thing to me, and I realized this is his pattern." She slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of text messages, emails, and documents that might help your case, including conversations about the house sale from 3 months ago." As I reached for the folder, she added quietly, "I'm sorry, Yvette. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am." The next morning, I shared Alison's information with Sarah and her team. The documents provided crucial evidence of premeditation and a pattern of behavior that strengthened our case considerably. "Let's find this Natalie Hamilton," Sarah decided. "If she's willing to testify about her experience, it could be extremely valuable." Robert, the private investigator, took on the task and located her within days. Natalie now lived in Seattle but agreed to speak with us via video call. Her story was disturbingly familiar: a whirlwind romance with James, combined finances, property transfers into his name, then a sudden cruel breakup that left her financially devastated. "It took me 3 years to recover financially and emotionally," she told us. "When I threatened legal action, he said his family had connections and would destroy me if I pursued it. I was young and scared, so I walked away." "Would you be willing to provide a sworn statement?" Sarah asked. "I'll do better than that," Natalie replied firmly. "I'll fly to Chicago and testify in person if needed. It's time someone stopped him." As we built our case, James made increasingly desperate moves. He attempted to access my inheritance account, claiming it had been commingled with marital funds. The bank, already alerted by Sarah, denied the transaction and documented the attempt. Then came a significant break. Geller withdrew as James's attorney, citing irreconcilable differences with the client regarding case strategy. Translation: James had likely lied to his own lawyer about the facts of the case. James quickly hired Richard Denton, a notorious divorce attorney known for scorched earth tactics. Denton immediately filed a countermotion, claiming I had misappropriated business funds and demanding I vacate the temporary apartment I had rented. The judge denied his motion and ordered James to continue paying the mortgage on the marital home, which, thanks to our injunction, had not actually transferred to the new buyers, and to provide temporary spousal support during the proceedings. Meanwhile, our social circle became a battlefield. James spread rumors that I had cheated, had secret addiction problems, was mentally unstable, anything to discredit me. Some mutual friends withdrew, unwilling to take sides or be drawn into the drama. Others, particularly those who had witnessed James's controlling behavior firsthand, reached out with messages of support. My colleagues at work became an unexpected source of strength. My team organized dinner deliveries to my apartment during the worst weeks. My assistant rescheduled meetings when court appearances ran long. Michael checked in regularly, making it clear that my job was secure despite the personal turbulence. With my promotion came the challenge of managing a larger team while navigating the divorce, but I welcomed the distraction and the confidence boost. Each successful presentation or strategic decision reinforced what I had begun to forget during my marriage. I was competent, intelligent, and capable of standing on my own. 2 months into the divorce proceedings, another crucial piece of evidence emerged. James's business partner, David Wilson, contacted Sarah, requesting a confidential meeting. With my permission, Sarah met with him and his personal attorney. James has been manipulating the company books, David revealed. I only discovered the extent of it after your client filed for divorce and the business accounts came under scrutiny. He's been diverting company profits to private accounts and reporting lower earnings to both the IRS and his wife. David provided internal financial records showing discrepancies between actual income and what James had reported. This evidence was turned over to the court, and on Sarah's advice to the district attorney's office, as the actions constituted tax fraud. The court ordered James to sit for a deposition, where Sarah and our forensic accountant questioned him for 8 grueling hours about his financial maneuvers. Under oath with evidence mounted against him, James's carefully constructed facade began to crack. He contradicted himself, became hostile, and eventually admitted to misremembering several significant transactions. The deposition transcript made its way to the DA's office, adding to their growing interest in the case. Tax fraud and financial crimes carried potential criminal penalties beyond the scope of our divorce proceedings. As pressure mounted, James attempted to leave the country for a business trip to the Cayman Islands, where coincidentally, we had discovered he had established accounts. Sarah immediately filed for travel restrictions, which the judge granted, given the evidence of potential flight risk. 6 months after James's cruel phone call, we arrived at the mandatory settlement conference. James sat across the table looking haggard, the confident smirk long gone. Denton had been pushing for settlement for weeks, a clear sign they recognized their deteriorating position. Before we begin, Sarah announced, placing a thick binder on the table, I want to make sure everyone understands the complete evidence package we're prepared to present at trial. She methodically outlined the financial fraud, the pattern of deception with previous partners, the documented attempts to hide assets, and the potential criminal charges looming in the background. Additionally, she continued, we have statements from Ms. Davis, Ms. Hamilton, and 4 other individuals detailing Mr. Patterson's history of financial manipulation and fraud. James paled visibly. Denton leaned over to whisper something in his ear, his expression grave. My client is prepared to be generous in the interest of resolving this matter efficiently. Denton began, but I cut him off. I don't want generosity, I said, speaking directly to James for the first time in months. I want what's fair. I want what I earned and contributed to during 8 years of marriage while you were planning to betray me. After hours of negotiation, we reached a settlement that included a 50-50 split of all marital assets, including the proceeds from the eventual legitimate sale of our home, my share of James's business based on its true valuation, reimbursement of my legal fees, a cash payment representing my portion of the assets James had attempted to hide. As we prepared to sign the agreement, James asked for a moment alone with me. Against Sarah's advice, I agreed, curious about what he could possibly say. In a small conference room, James looked at me with a mixture of defeat and lingering resentment. You know, I could have given you a good settlement from the beginning if you hadn't fought me so hard, he said, still unable to take responsibility. This was never about money, James, I replied. This was about respect and honesty, 2 things you never gave me. I did love you in the beginning, he offered, as if that changed anything. No, I said with certainty. You loved what I could do for you, how I made you look, how easily I trusted you. That's not love. I walked out without looking back, feeling lighter than I had in years. The year following my divorce became a time of rebuilding and rediscovery. With the settlement finalized, I faced the practical and emotional work of creating a new life entirely my own. The house James had tried to sell was eventually put on the market properly, with proceeds divided as agreed. I used my portion as a down payment on a modern condo in downtown Chicago, closer to my office and vibrant city life. Unlike our marital home, which had been decorated to James's taste, every piece of furniture, every color choice in my new place reflected my preferences alone. Processing the grief of losing my marriage proved more challenging than the legal battle. I found a therapist specializing in recovery from manipulative relationships who helped me understand the dynamics that had allowed James to control me so effectively. What you experienced was a form of emotional and financial abuse, Dr. Levine explained during one session. The self-doubt you're feeling is a normal response to years of gaslighting. Through weekly therapy, I gradually rebuilt my self-trust. I learned to recognize the warning signs I had missed and to establish healthier boundaries in all my relationships. Most importantly, I stopped blaming myself for not seeing through James's deception earlier. You weren't stupid, Dr. Levine reminded me often. You were trusting. Those are different things. The promotion I accepted during the divorce turned out to be transformative professionally. Leading the creative department played to my strengths and provided a confidence boost when I needed it most. My team exceeded targets for 3 consecutive quarters, earning recognition throughout the company. Reconnecting with friends who had drifted away during my marriage became another healing aspect of my recovery. Weekend brunches with college friends previously discouraged by James became monthly traditions. My mother and I established a weekly dinner date, making up for years of limited contact. James's legal troubles continued long after our divorce was settled. The evidence we had uncovered led to charges of tax fraud and financial misrepresentation. He eventually accepted a plea deal that included restitution fines and probation. His real estate business, built partly on fraudulent practices, collapsed under scrutiny. Approximately a year after our divorce was finalized, I encountered James unexpectedly at a restaurant downtown. I was dining with colleagues celebrating a successful campaign launch when he approached our table. "Yvette," he said, looking significantly less polished than in our married days. "You look well." "Thank you," I replied neutrally, aware of my colleagues' curious glances. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" he asked. Against my better judgment, I agreed to step away from the table briefly. "I want to apologize," he said once we were out of earshot. "What I did to you was wrong. I see that now." I studied his face, searching for the manipulation I had become skilled at identifying. What I saw instead was a man humbled by consequences, perhaps for the first time in his life. "I appreciate you saying that," I responded carefully. "I hope you've learnt from this experience." "I have," he insisted. "I lost everything that mattered." "No, James," I corrected him gently. "You discarded everything that mattered. There's a difference." I returned to my colleagues without looking back, closing that chapter definitively. As I rebuilt my life, I reflected often on the warning signs I had ignored. The control disguised as care, the isolation masked as exclusivity, the financial secrecy presented as competence. I had mistaken possession for love, control for security. The healing journey wasn't linear. Some days brought anger so intense it took my breath away. Other days carried sadness for the future I had once imagined. But gradually, the good days outnumbered the difficult ones. I formed new friendships with people who respected my boundaries and valued my voice. I strengthened relationships with family who had stood by me through the worst moments. I even cautiously began dating again this time, with clearer eyes and stronger boundaries. The most profound lesson from this painful chapter was the importance of financial independence and literacy. No matter how much you love someone, I learned you should never be in the dark about shared finances or surrender control of your financial future. My relationship with money transformed completely. I became knowledgeable about investments, retirement planning, and financial security. The inheritance I had protected became the foundation for a secure future entirely under my control. Looking back from the vantage point of my new life, I sometimes marvel at how completely James misjudged me. He saw my trust as weakness, my compromise as submission. He never imagined I would fight back with such determination and effectiveness. His greatest miscalculation was believing I would break, when instead I revealed a strength neither of us had fully recognized. The house he thought would leave me homeless led me to a home that truly feels like mine. The divorce he planned to impoverish me financially made me more secure and independent than ever before. The betrayal meant to diminish me ultimately revealed my resilience. If you're watching this and something in my story resonates with your experience, remember that trusting people isn't a character flaw. The person who abuses that trust bears the responsibility, not you. But also remember that you have more power than you might believe in moments of crisis. Trust your instincts when something feels wrong. Document everything. Build your support system. Know that recovery isn't just possible, it's inevitable when you take that first step toward valuing yourself. I'd love to hear your thoughts on financial independence within relationships. Have you maintained separate accounts or combined everything? What safeguards have you put in place? Leave a comment below and let's continue this important conversation. And if this story helped you feel less alone, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content about rebuilding after betrayal. Thank you for listening to my journey from devastation to determination. Remember, the story isn't over until you write the ending.